This is Dueling Pistols, where history draws first and legends never die. No fluff, no filters, just raw stories of grit, blood, and legacy. Triggered by Black Flag. All right, welcome back to the show. I am Brian Call, and I am joined by my brother, Brent Call. How are you, Brent?
I'm well, thank you.
All right. We're getting right back into our story, the epic story of Kit Carson and the conquest of the American West. This is the book Blood and Thunder, written by Hampton Sides. He also wrote Ghost Soldiers, which is a great book that you should check out. I read that one as well. But back to the book, where we left off, we got Kit Carson, and he failed to save Ann White. Mm-hmm. Not that it was necessarily his job.
I was going to say, he
tried, but Greer, what was he, colonel or whatever? Mm-hmm. Sergeant, whatever. I'm not an army guy. So anyway, he, just as they were getting to crash into the village and save Ann White, who had dropped some garments along the way. Yeah. Carson tried to charge the leader of the army that was there looking for her to do the rescue. They held back, blah, blah, blah. The hesitation gave the Apache, the Jicarilla.
That sounds right.
Jicarilla Apache gave them the opportunity to escape, and then they shot her. He said the body was still warm. Mm-hmm. Shot her through the heart. Body was still warm when they came up on her, so she hadn't been dead for more than 5 minutes. So, but it did sound like, by the looks of her, it was bad.
Yeah. Nah, she wasn't treated well.
So, back to the story, though. We're going to get back into this. This is, we're going to start talking a little bit more about the Navajo and the Navajo, because kind of right now, they're the last, you still have the Comanche and you have the Apache a little bit. And you have up in the plains area, you still have the Lakota, Sitting Bull, you have Crazy Horse. You have some Indian issues left, but not many. You know, the country is becoming continental from coast to coast. It's one continuous nation from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. America has taken over and pushed the Mexicans south, pushed the Canadians north, and the French and everything. And you're back into where we are today, though, is the Navajos are that biggest nation of Indians that is a major problem. We're going to read about it here. Back to the book. It says, the two horses were ready, and so were their riders. The animals flared their nostrils in the desert air and stamped their feet in anticipation. All the bets had been placed. Some 500 Navajo spectators had taken their spots on the sides of the dusty track outside the American fort. They were splayed out on their bright patterned blankets, reveling in the carnival atmosphere, shouting out encouragements and the occasional tame invective. The excitement had been building all day. Since morning, the Navajos had been streaming in from the Rimrock country, women and children, as well as warriors on horseback and on foot, wearing their finest outfits and bearing serapes and jewelry to trade with the soldiers, whom the Navajos sometimes called something sticking out from the foreheads because of the distinct visors protruding from their army-issue caps.
That's an interesting name.
There had been bartering and games and feasting through the midday, but in the afternoon, the main event, the race had begun. The race is. The Navajos were entranced by the spectacle of the track. Not only were they avid gamblers, they were a tribe with a proud history of horsemanship. Racing ran deep in their blood, so they loved gambling and racehorses.
Surprise, surprise.
This was to be the last race of the afternoon, the most important race, the one with the fastest horses and the biggest stakes. Large bets, larger than on the other races, were made on both sides, recalled one witness. The Indians, some of them mounted on fine ponies, were richly dressed, and all appeared to be there to see the race, and not with any hostile intentions. In lieu of money, the wagers were made in the form of hard goods. The Indians bet their fine blankets and silver wares, while the soldiers wagered U.S. government property taken from the fort commissary, barrels of bacon, hogs' heads of molasses, and the like, an illegal practice that the fort commander, in the interest of entertainment, was willing to overlook. Most of the soldiers were watching from the gates of the fort, but others were mingling with the Indian throngs. Kegs of whiskey had been flowing freely through the day. Some Navajos called the great casks hollow woods. And now soldiers and Indians alike were good and drunk. That's not good. That is not
What are you
good.
talking about, Brian?
There's violent drunks and there's funny drunks and there's...
Brian, they're just going to get drunk and have some horse racing. Civil horse racing.
It was a bright, crisp day in Indian country. Early fall of 1861. Hints of autumn played on the air. The camisa had taken on I don't know what that is. Camisa had taken on a blazing yellow. Probably the horizon, or I don't know. And the aspens were just beginning to turn on Mount Taylor. Maybe that's a plant. Anyway, not the aspen. I know what that is. Whose broad shoulders rose impressively from they're talking about the mountain. All this flowery language. Whatever. It was Fort Fauntleroy was one of several strongholds that the United States military had built in Navajo country, largely on the basis of information gleaned from the 1849 Washington expedition and the resulting maps that were pieced together by James Simpson, that topographer. The fort was set in a beautiful spot called Bear Springs, the same ancient gathering place tucked in the Zuni Mountains where Narbona had met with Alexander Donovan in 1846 to sign the first treaty between the Navajos and the United States government. So that first group that kind of wandered in and had a party and then left, right there. The regimental surgeon at the fort, an Irish doctor named F.E. Kavanagh, owned a fleet thoroughbred that he insisted could not be beaten. Kavanagh had been racing him all summer and the horse had never lost. In anticipation of today's contest, the soldiers posted at the fort had pampered and trained the champion, making sure it was in top form. To jockey his prized animal, Kavanagh selected a lithe and small-statured New Mexican lieutenant named Rafael Ortiz, a fierce competitor who was always at home in a saddle. But the Navajos had their own prized pony, a jittery little sorrel with a spirit for the track. Rumors circulated that Navajo medicine men had performed elaborate ceremonies to ensure victory for their animal, chanting over a fetish shaped in the image of a horse. A young Navajo boy, light and quick of reflex, would ride the sorrel that day, but stories differ about whose horse it was. According to one account, the pony was owned by a large Navajo man the Americans called Pistol Bullet. Other accounts say the owner was none other than Manuelito, Narbona's bold and truculent son-in-law who had emerged as one of the great leaders of the tribe. Manuelito was an expert horseman, a man attentive to good breeding and rich enough to own the best. If he was indeed there at the fort that day, watching his horse compete, enjoying a moment of peace, it was a rare appearance, and most likely he would have kept himself incognito. For Manuelito was the sworn enemy of the Americans. Consistently, emphatically, categorically, he alone among his tribesmen had advocated war, known by his countrymen as Hastin Chihanjini, or blackweeds. Manuelito hated...
These people can't name for garbage.
Blackweeds, that's kind of intense.
Pistol Bullet? Is Pistol Bullet, Brian? That's ridiculous.
I don't know, blackweeds does seem dark.
This is my son's sword handle, and my other son, axe shaft. Like, those are not like cool names. This is like drunken or swimming canoe all over again.
I don't know. You've got black weeds. Maybe it sounds cool, but weeds can't be killed, right? I mean, there is some symbolism here, my brother.
They're hard to kill.
It says that blackweeds hated everything about the Americans. They had slaughtered his cattle herds. They had murdered his father-in-law. They had stuck forts in the craw of the Navajo Nation. To their every demand, his response was the same uncut rage. The people, he roared, must drive the Bilagana from the country. And certainly, he had tried. The last few years, 1858, 1859, 1860, have been particularly violent ones, and always Manuelito had been at the center of the maelstrom. His steady, implacable voice urging his countrymen not to budge an inch. The Donovan Treaty, signed with so much optimism and goodwill, had proven scarcely worth the paper it was written on, which was 3 years earlier. The Dene now had enemies on all sides. They suffered nearly constant attacks, not just from the New Mexicans, but also from Utes, Comanches, Apaches, and other ancient foes, as well as from their new foe, the American soldiers, who inflicted their punishments with increasing vigor. It seemed to the Navajo that they were surrounded by wolves. Even nature had turned against them. There was a terrible drought as well. Their society had been stressed to the breaking point. The medicine men had lost their touch and old ceremonies didn't seem to work. The Dene had reached the nadir of their tribe's existence, a decade of doubt and struggle that they still call to this day the Nahanzad, the fearing time.
I love me a good medicine man. Because here's the thing about medicine men. You never know what's going to come out of their mouth. They get to say the most outlandish things ever.
Well, you can see the picture being painted here. It's a tough time for them right now. They're starting to get squeezed.
Mm-hmm.
Things aren't going well. The American military commanders in Santa Fe, even more obtuse ones, recognized that the old war between the Navajos and the New Mexicans was a two-sided quarrel with legitimacy on both sides. But they almost always accepted the New Mexicans' version and went after the Navajo. So part of the problem was a lack of consistency. From year to year, the Navajos had little idea whom they were dealing with. So it talks about how they would go through different colonels, Indian affairs people. You got Kearney, Donovan, Price, Washington, Beall, Monroe, Sumner, Garland, Bonneville, Fauntleroy, and now the current military governor, Colonel Edward Canby. He ends up, I think he dies in Oregon. Canby.
Makes sense.
He gets shot by an Indian during a fake truce, if I got the story right.
Really?
Which we lived next to Canby, Oregon. Went over there a lot, hunted ducks. Each of these men had attacked the Navajo problem in his own way, with lesser or greater degrees of insight and militancy. So, yeah, there's just a stew of things causing problems. You got different religious between Christians and the native peoples, and, there's just strife and conflict. And then when you have someone as angry as Blackweeds with doing the thug life, he's gonna, there's no room for truce here. It says that there was an Indian agent named Dodge. His 4-year tenure was a testament to the potential power of one-man diplomacy. While Dodge was agent, they were at peace with the Navajo, and the raiding was scarce during that time. So you have the right man in the right job, just like a coach for a football team and so on. He did pretty good. So he was tirelessly soliciting on their behalf and taking care of the... But once he left, though, it just fell right back apart again, the relationship between the Americans and the Navajos. It says the conflict between the Bilagana and the Navajos came to a flashpoint in the spring of 1858 when Manuelito insisted on grazing his cattle herds on the grounds of an American fort called Fort Defiance. This is way in deep into Navajo Red Rock country, as you know, to piss him off. And the fort just got built, and that pissed him off. So when the American soldiers instructed Manuelito to remove his animals from U.S. property, the headman refused. "The water there is mine, not yours," he said. "And the same with the grass. Even the ground it grows from belongs to me, not you." And so the soldiers marched out and shot every one of his cattle.
But not him?
They killed all the cattle in Manuelito's cattle herd, some 60 of them.
Dang.
And left them to rot in the field.
Wow, that's messed up. Wanton waste.
A month after the herd was slaughtered, an anonymous Navajo came to Fort Defiance to trade with the soldiers. When no one was looking, the Navajo turned and fired an arrow into the back of a teenage black slave owned by the American commander. While the Navajo made a clean getaway, the stricken boy, whose name was Jim, attempted to pull the arrow out himself, but the shaft broke off with the arrow lodged deep in his body. Jim died of his wounds several days later. Interpreting the incident as a personal attack, Major Brooks threatened to obliterate the Navajos if they did not produce the murderer at once. A few weeks later, the Navajos obliged, hauling in the corpse of the man they said was the culprit. Yeah, sure. But the fort surgeon conducted an autopsy on the cadaver and determined the Dene were trying to pull a fast one. The body was that of a Mexican who met almost none of the physical descriptions of the murderer. Dude, these savages, all of them.
He did it. That one.
After that, the situation escalated into a fairly hot war, with the American army leading multiple forays into Navajo country to hunt down Manuelito. But they weren't so successful. Then in April 1860, Manuelito organized 1,000 Navajo warriors and staged a full frontal assault on Fort Defiance. Now that's balls. Striking before dawn and armed primarily with arrows, he and his warriors occupied a number of the fort buildings, killed a United States soldier, and produced numerous casualties. However, Manuelito's near triumph at Fort Defiance did nothing to change American policy in the end, but it cemented his reputation as the preeminent warrior of the Navajo. Says by all accounts and by photographs, Manuelito looked the part. Blackweeds was tall and dark with a distant air of menace, the sort of man who made people, even other Navajos, edgy. His shoulders were broad, his chest muscular, his torso long and lean. He had a scar on the left side of his chest and a gunshot wound sustained in a fight with Comanches. He carried himself with great confidence, for he was one of the true Ricos of the tribe, blessed with many thousands of sheep, numerous children, and at least 2 wives, Narbona's daughter and a Mexican woman named Juanita he had stolen in a raid. His chin was scuffed with a wispy beard, and his facial features, chiseled and vaguely Asian, made him look like a Mongol chieftain. Nearly every photograph of Manuelito shows the scowl of an all-consuming wrath. Show me a picture. A biography now taught in Navajo schools describes Blackweeds this way, quote, angry fire burned within him and he refused to put it out. He was born in 1818, a son of the Bitani or Folded Arms clan, and grew up in a place called the Bears Ears in present-day Utah. Oh, I know that. Because his homeland was close to the mountain country of the roving Ute Indians, he grew up trilingual, fluent in both Navajo and Ute, as well as Spanish. Even as a child, he carried himself with a jaunty arrogance that made people notice. His friends teased him that even though he had not been on a single raid, he walked around as though he were a headman. He's got some swagger. He said, I walk like a headman now, so that when I become one, I already know how to behave. In 1835, at the age of 17, he participated in his first battle, the ambush on the invading Mexican army in Copper Pass, organized by Narbona. He donned a war helmet, carried a buckskin shield, and painted serpents on the soles of his moccasins.
Wow. He does look Mongolian.
That's Manuelito.
Yeah, if you show me that picture, I would think that guy's Mongolian for sure.
Yeah, I've seen this picture many times. I've seen this quite often. Huh. Yeah. You know what's so funny? You know, these guys, I don't know how old he is here, but it's this, I'm sure, some native diet that he's on. But the man isn't jacked. You know what I mean? I'm sure he's strong, but he doesn't have the sort of definition that a modern athlete has.
Yeah,
and some Indians I've seen, like, of that time frame.
Warrior. You know, that's not the physique that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Here's him younger.
Okay. Yeah. Looks tall. That's for sure. He looks tall. So he started fighting when he was young. At 17, 15, he was in wars, I should say. And as he grew into full manhood, Manuelito came to think that his father-in-law's efforts at peacemaking were wrong-headed, naive, and ultimately ruinous for the tribe. And then, of course, he got killed. It says that
Here's one of him and his wife in 1881. A little colorization done to it.
Look how 1881, that's been a while. She looks way younger than him.
No, a child bride, Brian.
It says, if Manuelito was an absolutist, because we're talking right now, we're about 1849, 1850, something like that. So that's 31 years later. So he obviously doesn't get killed.
He hangs on.
It says, if Manuelito was an absolutist, other Navajos were willing to bend and accommodate. They frequented the American forts to trade and to drink, to gather whatever sorry crumbs might be tossed their way. Some Navajo women became whores for the soldiers. Other Navajos hired themselves as quislings, spying on their own people, or guiding military expeditions into their homeland. One man in particular, a notoriously clever Navajo trader named Sandoval, became so good at playing both ends against the middle that his band acquired the name Dene Anai, the enemy Navajo, an aspersion by which his descendants are known to this day.
Dang, that's ruthless.
Enemy Navajo. Yeah. Despite what Manuelito said about them, the Americans weren't all bad. In response to the drought, commanders gave them food, took care of the hungriest. It was easier to feed the Navajo than to fight them.
That word back there, quisling. Are you familiar with that word?
Yeah.
The definition of it: a traitor who collaborates with an enemy force occupying their country.
I didn't know it was that specific.
I knew that it had to do something with a turncoat.
Yeah, I knew that.
Yeah, but it specifically is someone who was helping an occupying force.
Traitor.
And one more thing. You gotta see this. This is a picture of Manuelito when he's very young.
Okay, he looks kind of feminine.
That long hair right there, yeah.
His face, no hair on it. I mean, He could definitely pass for a woman from the neck up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that.
Look how
chin
little
and
the
jaw.
bows are. You know, the same other one he had. If you look at the other photo, the bow and arrow, is that decorative or for real? It doesn't look like much of a bow. You know,
I'm trying to go. That's
it's
a painting.
very
That's
primitive
not-
looking.
His other bow that
Was it longer?
it's to the left of him. You can see it next to him. He's sitting down, and it's about as long as he is with him standing up straight like this. It's about as tall as he is.
Yeah, that's a lot longer than the other bow. Still, it doesn't have much of a curve to it or anything.
It's very straight,
Yeah.
which means it's got a.
I don't know.
For those that
he's
didn't-
got the gun and
For those listening, that was me pulling back my bow. I just making a weird sound.
it says that the Americans weren't all bad, and now the moment had come, the day's grand finale. It says that the soldiers, they would hand out supplies, meat and flour to the Navajo in throngs. Ration day became a festive affair, a day of good cheer. One captain at Fort Fauntleroy sensed a new friendly feeling within the tribe. It was only natural that the Navajos and soldiers would hatch the idea of crowning the day with a series of horse races. And it kind of represented a little bit of a friendship going on. Now the moment had come, the day's grand finale. Rafael Ortiz and the young Navajo rider nosed their horses up to the starting line. Drunk and gambling. This can't go well.
I don't know what you talk about, Brian. Drinking and going fast that's like that's not even an American tradition. That's a human tradition.
Well, it says, as was traditional at the fort, the racers did not wait for the gun to start. Instead, they relied on an informal honor system in which either rider would call for a restart if he thought his opponent had bolted early. 3 times the Navajo boy turned back, but on the 4th attempt, the 2 riders sprinted across the dusty flats as the liquored crowds roared in delight.
Okay.
At first, the 2 horses kept pace with each other, but by the end of the first furlong, the spectators could tell something was wrong with the sorrel. The Navajo rider was having trouble controlling his mount, and soon he veered completely off the track. Ortiz continued on, his thoroughbred galloping effortlessly across the finish line. The Navajos were shocked and then outraged. Their inspection of the sorrel suggested foul play. Its bridle had been slashed, they said. Someone had sabotaged the horse. They demanded a rematch.
Someone's playing dirty.
But the soldiers refused.
Hold on. So we have the Navajos and the soldiers, and who's the Navajos? Horse is the one that went down?
Yeah.
So the soldiers most likely are playing dirty.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Just make sure I'm on the ball.
That's what it's saying. Unless the Navajos were sore losers. But the horse ran off the track and went all haywire. So,
yeah, what if the jockey's just drunk?
Okay, let me finish the story. Jeez. It says the soldiers refused to do a rematch, which they should have just done. Okay, fine, let's rematch in an hour or two.
This is sounding like that's my horse right there all over again. Remember how that turned out, folks?
Yep. It says Dr. Kavanaugh's thoroughbred had won fair and square, and that's what they insisted. They collected their wagers, and marched around the parade grounds with Kavanaugh's horse, flaunting their victory. Look, dude, this is what you do is you let them win. Just to give them a bone. You know what I mean? Like, who's in charge here?
Not a politician. I'll tell you what, man. This is the one time I'll say, man, we could use some politicians around here.
Said one participant, a procession of the winning party went whooping and hollowing to the sound of drums beating and fifes and fiddles screeching. The Navajos returned to their camp and sulked like so many other times since the Americans had arrived. The Dene felt they'd been double-crossed. Yeah. You know, when you're winning across the board, you know, you got to give them, no one wants to play with someone who beats them over and over again. There was so much discussion about what to do next. Most thought they should cut their losses and go home, but a group of hotheads drunk like their soldier counterparts had other ideas because alcohol is such a good idea. They rose up and stormed over to the fort. They swaggered over to the guardhouse, yelling insults and half-audible threats, demanding that their wagers be returned. Then, from within the gates, the crack of a rifle pierced the afternoon air, and Fort Fauntleroy was plunged into chaos. That's a dumb name.
That's gotta be French.
Fauntleroy.
That sounds so French.
The officer in charge of Fort Fauntleroy, Colonel Manuel Chavez, was a legendary Indian fighter, hugely admired within the territory, second in reputation only to Kit Carson himself. Short, stocky, and fierce-tempered, Chavez had a crinkled face of olive skin, a thick beard, and long raven hair that skimmed his shoulders. The 43-year-old Chavez hailed from a venerable family that dated back to the first colonists of New Mexico. He was of Portuguese and Spanish ancestries. That was part of the group that drove the Moors from the Iberian Peninsula. So, comes from a line of warrior types. Manuel Antonio Chavez was born along the Bosque near Albuquerque and grew up in a tiny frontier settlement on the edge of Navajo country, a settlement which Narbona had nearly destroyed in his Great Siege of 1804.
I wonder if anyone holds a grudge.
It says that he traveled all over. He became a captain of militias. He was beloved, larger-than-life figure, a favorite son of the province, and he was brave on the field of battle, and that had won him the nickname the Little Lion.
Little Lion.
Mm-hmm. The Little Lion. So it says that Chavez had nearly died in a Navajo clash, only 16 at the time. The pluck he demonstrated in the incident made him a household name throughout New Mexico. The year was 1834. His older brother, Joe, decided to lead a slave raid into Navajo country and invited young Manuel along as a kind of initiation rite. 16. The men from the Ciboleta, capitalizing on their geographical proximity to Navajo lands, had long specialized in hunting slaves and had made it a considerable part of their local economy. Departing from Ciboleta, the small, well-armed party traveled deep into Dinétah, or Navajo lands, looking for some unsuspecting woman or child to capture. To their bewilderment, they never saw a soul. The country seemed strangely flushed, clean of people. But when they came to the rim of Canyon de Shelly and peered down into the Great Gulch, they found their answer.
Nothing good is ever in this canyon.
Thousands of Navajo were gathered on the sandy floor, reveling in an enormous ceremonial dance, their horses all herded together in a tight branch of the canyon.
What kind of dance, Brian?
Alarmed by the large number of the enemy, Jose Chavez
hang out with our buddies
realized
next door?
He was tempting fate. He directed the party to turn around and leave at once, but they were too late. Diné scouts had spotted them, and soon hundreds of warriors appeared. They knew that these invading Nakais, as the Navajo called New Mexicans, had come to hunt slaves, so the warriors attacked with righteous fury. The Chavez party was assailed by a storm of arrows. Young Manuel fought as best he could until he lost consciousness. The Navajos, satisfied that they had killed every last man, finally ceased fire. After taking the party's guns and ransacking the supplies, he returned in triumph to the canyon. Manuel awoke several hours later to discover that he had 7 arrow wounds. He was disoriented and desperately weak from blood loss. Everyone in the party, including his brother, was dead. Manuel took measure of his predicament. He was more than 200 miles from home in a hostile country he did not know, 16 years old and lacking a weapon, with several thousand Navajos encamped close by. Manuel buried his brother in a shallow grave, then started trudging south by southeast. After 2 days of walking in desolate desert country, he came to a familiar place, Bear Springs, future site of Fort Fauntleroy. In the cool spring water, he washed his wounds and assuaged his hunger by sucking the sour pads of prickly pear cactuses. Feverish, his arrow punctures hot and swollen, he somehow summoned the strength to continue walking. At times,
how mad I'd be. 7 arrows.
At times, he lost consciousness and frequently fell into hallucinations. But a few days later, young Manuel Chavez staggered into Ciboleta, the sole survivor of the expedition.
That's pretty gnarly.
7
arrows.
Chavez later fought that's what he said, with distinction alongside U.S. troops in the 1847 counteroffensive against the Taos insurrections, but he was a volunteer, not a career Army regular. In 1861, it was an unusual arrangement for a territorial volunteer, even one as accomplished as he, to command a U.S. fort of such importance, but these were unusual times. Back east, the Civil War had begun. So putting new Mexican recruits in American uniforms, furnishing them with weapons and stationing them, blah, blah, blah. So basically Chavez was in charge, and he was in charge, and he was there to keep the hostiles at bay and to come up with soldiers wherever he could. So a lot of them weren't even American. The rifle boomed across the grounds and echoed in the distant canyons. Alarmed soldiers seized their weapons and scurried about the grounds of the fort in great confusion. And as one witness described it, every man ran to arm himself. Companies did not regularly form, but every man ran wherever he thought fit. The word was one of the drunk Navajos had tried to force his way past the sentinel guard, and the sentinel fired and killed the Indian on the spot. In the field outside the fort, hundreds of Navajos scrambled for cover. It is unclear who gave the order or if it was simply a spontaneous thing, but the soldiers aimed their rifles and started firing into the crowd, drilling bullets into the backs of the fleeing Indians. In twos and threes, the Navajos dropped in their tracks. Other soldiers chased after their victims on foot and ran them down with bayonets, not only warriors, but women and children. I mean,
It's excessive.
yeah, everything about it. It's like you were just racing with them, hanging out. Everything's good. One shot, and it's just like kill them all. Just, you know what I mean?
I don't get how they can go from
Mixing the alcohol in wasn't helping, I'm sure.
probably.
An eyewitness, Captain Nichols Hote, later described the sickening scene to an investigative committee set up by the U.S. Congress. I saw a soldier murdering 2 little children and a woman. I hallooed immediately for him to stop. He looked up, but did not obey my order. I ran as quick as I could, but could not get there soon enough to prevent him from killing the 2 innocent children and wounding severely the squaw. Outraged, Hote arrested the soldier and ordered him to hand over his cartridge belts. Out of the chaos, Colonel Manuel Chavez asserted his authority, but instead of calling his troops to order, he only escalated the action. He ordered an artillery sergeant to bring out the mountain howitzers and open fire. Captain Hote said the sergeant pretended not to understand the order given, for he considered it unlawful, but being cursed by the officer of the day and threatened, he had to execute the order or get himself in trouble, or tell him to F off.
Mm-hmm. I would make a terrible military man.
Screaming Navajos ran in wild patterns across the valley below. It was a wholesale slaughter. More than 20 Indians, many of them women and children, lay dead in the field. Scores more were wounded, and 112 were taken prisoner. After the shelling subsided, Captain Hote brought the man he'd seen murdering the Navajo children to Lieutenant Ortiz. He described to Ortiz the atrocity he had witnessed out in the field and explained why he had disarmed and arrested the man, and Ortiz responded by pulling out his own pistol, cocking it, and aiming at Hote, saying, "Give this soldier back his arms, or else I'll shoot you, goddamn you."
That's fine. Whatever. Let him go. Stab him in his sleep later.
There's no rules, no ethics here. No, it was like, it says that Hote reluctantly obeyed, but reported Ortiz's action to Colonel Chavez. Hote received no satisfaction from the little lion, however. On the contrary, Chavez said that Lieutenant Ortiz did perfectly right and thought the soldier who killed the 2 children deserved credit, not censure. Case dismissed.
That's scary. That's the kind of stuff that, like, I find horrifying.
The thing is, I mean, it's just disgusting in the sense that they were like, yeah, you defy us and we'll kill the women and children and we'll kill whoever. It wasn't like they had guns or were really firing back at the fort either. Yeah. If I'm a Navajo though, I'm like Manuelito, back to that survival, situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't go and I see the alcohol and the gambling. I'm like, I'd be out.
I always say, bro, I don't party for that reason, man.
Later, realizing that things had perhaps gotten a little bit out of hand, or a lot, Chavez went to work on damage control. In his report to authorities in Santa Fe, he stated with great regret that the Navajos, without provocation, had attacked the guard of the post, and that his men were only acting in self-defense. He tried to cover up the incident, or at least control the rumors emanating from it, but by not allowing any letters to leave the fort for weeks. So, when you have someone like Chavez who was shot with 7 arrows and his brother murdered by the Navajo or killed by the Navajo and the entire group he was with, and he had to walk back 200 miles and survive, you gotta see that there is probably in Chavez. He's not an army leader, by the way. He's not technically in the army. He's in charge of leading the army, but he's not an official.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be.
He's not a military man.
And so, and yet he's making decisions on this stuff. You put someone in there who can kill Indians, That's for sure. And has the will to do it. But you didn't put someone in there who's like a General Kearney.
Yeah.
You know?
He's not pulling off any tactical masterpiece move
No.
or anything like that.
It says, but it was a massacre, pure and simple. And when authorities in Santa Fe found out about it, they suspended Chavez from command. Briefly, Chavez was held under house arrest in Albuquerque in preparation for a court-martial hearing, and Kit Carson was sent there to conduct a preliminary investigation. The Army, it seemed, was less concerned with the colonel's possible role in the mass slaughter of fleeing Navajos than with the revelation that Chavez had permitted his soldiers to wager government property on horse races.
It's weird.
Again, he was breaking all the rules, really. Mm-hmm. The trial never came to pass. With the storm clouds of the Civil War looming on the horizon, and with the ranks of the U.S. Army in consequent disarray, the incident at Fort Fauntleroy was all but forgotten. Charges were dropped, and if anything, the Little Lion won public adulation for taking such a hard line against attacking Navajos. Never again would there be horse races at Fort Fauntleroy. The shaky truce was over. The massacre would have a profound influence on the Dene, moving them deeper into the fearing time. From that point on, the tribe would increasingly see the wisdom of Manuelito's path, especially now that the U.S. troops were abandoning the frontier forts to prepare for the invasion of the Confederate Army that was rumored to be advancing from San Antonio. The Americans were clearly distracted now. Something was pulling them away, and Manuelito and others could sense a new opportunity. Now, they said, was the time to strike. Yep, there you have it. Yeah, the Little Lion shot 7 times.
Do you think he actually got shot 7 times? That's a lot of arrows.
Obviously, he didn't get shot in...
57 got shot 9 times.
If he didn't get shot in the lungs or a vital organ, you know...
Just a hole then? Not a big deal?
I mean, shots in the legs and the arms and so on. If it didn't hit a vital artery, you know... He can muster through all of that. Yeah. You know, I've shot enough animals with an arrow.
Yeah.
You don't hit them in the right spot. You're not killing them. Mm-hmm. Not anytime soon. And he evidently was able to get himself back in time, you know, and in relatively good enough shape to take care of himself. But yeah, it's really sad the way that unfolded, you know, horse races, all this stuff. Things were going well, but you can tell the leadership at that fort was just partying. Mm-hmm. It seems like they were just having a good old gay time. Some of the Navajos are prostitutes. They were giving them stuff instead of fighting them. It was like the will to have a fight wasn't, you know, they didn't seem to have an overall noble approach to the situation. No. Once that Indian affairs or that Indian agent Dodge left, because they had 3 years of prosperity, and then Chavez was in charge after that. It just sounds like it just fell apart. You can't underestimate the importance of leadership. Anyway, that's the show today. That's what happened. So we're gonna jump ahead in the next episode and get to there's a number of smaller stories and goings-ons, but we're gonna jump through that. We're almost done with the story. There's not much left. There's a couple more key chapters and parts of the story I want to finish up that are pretty wild, and I think it's going to paint that full picture. I really hoped that with the podcast we would be able to show for people who listened to episode 1 with Daniel Boone sort of the coming of someone like Boone, the Quakers, and how America came to be by the time we end this Kit Carson story, like how we got to that point, you know? And I think these are 2 different, you got the 100 years kind of with Boone, and then you got like another generation with Kit Carson. They're like 2 separate generations, but those 2 generations span that length and connect all the dots from the early 1700s when America started to have colonists move here. And then later we went through the French and Indian War, and we went through the Revolution and Boone, and here you are now, and you're going, okay, how do we get the rest of the United States and so on? Well, you're getting the story painted for you.
I see that there's this relationship between the United States and the native people here. And the way that I kind of look at it is you have like a married couple at the age of 18, And then you have a married couple at the age of 80. Same couple, but that relationship has been through so much. It's so nuanced. And a lot of the times I think we just look at the end, how it ended. We don't look at the beginning very well, and we certainly don't look at what happened in between.
No. And I think that it's very, very
Nuanced.
Yep. I think that basically that human beings and human nature is a thing. Like human nature is a thing. It's what it is. And it doesn't matter what race you are, tribe, background, and all of that. You just have the basic ingredients of human nature in you.
Good and evil.
Yeah. So you can't just say this group bad, this group good. It's not like that at all. And this is a case where you had a very primitive population and a very advanced population. You're talking about a population that didn't invent the wheel yet. They were towing.
Oh, weird.
They were pulling people and gear on travois, which aren't even sleds. They're sticks, one on each side of the horse with like a blanket tied in between with stuff set on it, and
it's a step up from being dragged.
Yeah. I mean, it's a travois, and, and they move from place to place, dragging that travois, and those sticks leave 2 lines in the plains and everything. And you've got that group, and then you have the wheel. You have not too long. You have the horse when the Spanish come that they didn't have too. But you got the wheel. The horse was a technology that they never had until the Spanish got here. You have guns from muskets, and you have howitzers and artillery. You just have a technological advancement that just dwarfs where the Indians are coming from. Dwarfs them. It's primitive,
huge gap
to very civilized. You also have cities with water and running water and all this sort of stuff. And you have trains that can just take you from one part of the country to the other in an hour, which would otherwise be the most harrowing journey you've ever been on a horse or something. So you just have this technological advancement that I think a lot of people don't, when they think back on it, they just don't realize, when they look at it, they're like, well, cowboys and Indians were primitive in a way, like very, very much on equal footing. No, not even close. The native people were so far behind in the area of technology. Now, where were they more advanced? In areas of health and medicine. They were closer to the earth, closer to the animals. They understood animal husbandry probably better, or at least animal behavior. They were probably healthier and lived longer in many ways than the European counterparts. So, but you're talking about 2 different groups that are both bring a lot of value to one another, but are so different they can't even seem to blend. Although you have people like Carson and others who could go between an Indian tribe and his own people.
So far and few between.
Oh, for sure. Remember how Boone was practically an Indian, right? Like he hung out with him. He was the adopted son. Was he Little Turtle or
Chitawi?
Yeah, that's right. I think that it's so much more nuanced than we realize, and it's very easy to judge what happened. I can take one incident and say, yes, that one man inflicted evil on another, but on the whole, and it goes both ways, right? What they did to Anne White sounds absolutely barbaric and savage. Because they wanted their stuff, Certainly, you can see 2 sides of this. Now, were the whites moving in on Indian territory? Yes, they were. But did they have to be that brutal and barbaric and rape her? And all of that?
Yeah, someone's got a culture of scalping, and another one doesn't.
I don't know.
That's gnarly.
Those mountain men were all about the scalp.
I would say those mountain men took to scalping like fish to water. It's a little creepy how they're like, scalping, you say? All right.
Yeah, again, human nature, but it definitely is a more primitive time. Lifespans are shorter. Survival of the fittest. You don't know if you'll be around next year. Well, we have crazy lifespans now.
Yeah.
And so long as, especially if you're in America, so long as you do some basics, you can live till you're old and be expected to do so.
Don't smoke or eat the Play-Doh food. You live.
Vaccines, stay away from some of that. Yeah. Anyway, it's pretty fascinating. So, all right, folks, I hope you're enjoying the Dueling Pistols podcast. If you like it, do us a favor and share it with a friend. Help us get this thing to grow a little bit bigger. Tell your dad, your mom, your brother, your sister, your buddy, your uncle,
Go to
your
contacts,
grandpa.
hit select all, send.
Just sell it. Just share it with a friend of yours, somebody, and help us spread the word about the show. Thanks for supporting us. We'll catch you on the next episode.